So you can only watch on demand when the event's finished. Very good.
Hello and welcome back, everyone. Thanks for staying with us. It's been a long day, but really interesting one. Lots of great speakers, and we have one more to end day 2. We have Kristin Hancock, who will be talking about something that we probably all, have had experience of and stories of. So it's the high stakes game of trust in communication. I'll hand it over to Kristin.
Thank you, Sophia. It's so wonderful to be here. Hello to everyone. We're in very different time zones here. And so I noticed in the last session that we were drinking gin, and then I missed this gin memo. So I'm still on coffee here in North America, but I am absolutely toasting anyone who is celebrating the end of their Tuesday with any sort of cocktail that's happening, wine, beer, whatever that might be. So hello, everyone. Welcome. So excited. I know there's others of you here from North America who are joining me as well. My name's Kristin Hancock, as Sophia mentioned. A big thank you to everyone who is responsible for this commsHERO week. It's a phenomenal event. I will admit this is my first commsHERO. It will not be my last. It's such a well-organized event. So thank you to Asif and everyone who is responsible for this miracle of an event. I'm going to get started with my presentation here and all the technology things that happen. I'm going to see a little bit of the back end of PowerPoint here. All right, I'm going to assume everyone can see my slides unless I hear Sophia come on and tell me otherwise. So welcome, everyone. As Sophia mentioned, I'm Kristin Hancock. My pronouns are she and her. I am thrilled to be here with you for about the next half hour, and then we've got time afterwards for questions. I know there's the chat function we've all been using today and also the Q&A. So Sophia is going to be monitoring that part of it. Feel free, comments and chats. There might be some hot takes and hot topics in here today. So I'm looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say in relation to this. Before I get started with anything, what I would love to do with everyone is take about 15-30 seconds and just recenter, come back to it. I know, as Sophia mentioned, it's been a long day for everyone and a very full, packed day of information. So if we can all take a few seconds and take a deep breath together with our feet on the floor and inhale. And exhale. And let's do that one more time. Inhale and exhale. Thank you for that. Breath work has become a really important part of my professional life and also with what we're doing in ecology. And so I appreciate everyone allowing me to share that with you. Just find it helps us all get in the right mindset to learn and also potentially reframe some ideas that we've had in our brains before. I know the session's being recorded, so don't worry too much about taking notes. I'd love for people to be present and interactive with everything that's happening here. Again, the chat function is there as well. Before I really get into the meat of it, I do also want to take a moment and acknowledge the work of communicators over, I would say the past year, but I think we're pushing a year and a half, maybe even 2 years at this point. I want to acknowledge that what has happened in the world globally over the last almost 2 years has been a remarkable strain on businesses, on our profession, on communications. I know that we have all struggled with misinformation, mistrust, overwork, burnout, all of those things, job loss for many of us. And so I want to acknowledge that first. I want to acknowledge where we're all coming from. And I want to say thank you for the work that we've all done over the last year and a half. We have all collectively worked to elevate our profession. And I know there are many organizations who now value the function and value of communication more than they did before. And I know that is because of the work that we have all put in. So thank you to all of you for that. And please pat yourselves on the back for all of the work that we've done over the last couple of years and the fact that we have all hopefully gotten through it. I am very confident that we are on the tail end of the worst of it. And I know that we will take the lessons we've learned and build on them moving forward. So I've got about 3 little sections in this session today. The high stakes game of trust in communication. Sounds like a James Bond film. I'm going to do a brief introduction about me. We're going to talk about the state of trust in different industries, how it impacts communication, and arguably most importantly, what we can all do about it together. So a big welcome. Some of you may know me. I live a little bit on the internet, so people tend to know a little bit more about me before I introduce myself. But I'll start a little bit with who am I? Where am I from? What's my favorite boxed pasta? I don't know if the UK has boxed pasta, however we pronounce it. But in Canada, we, instead of calling it craft dinner, we call it KD. I don't know if that's a thing anywhere else, but a little bit fun things about me. I am a Canadian immigrant living in America. I am living in the city of Indianapolis in the state of Indiana. I am from the province of Manitoba in Canada, which is right dead center in the country. And I recently went back for the first time in 2 years. And what an experience international travel is these days. My education and professional background is, of course, communications, mostly in healthcare, a little bit of government, and also some nonprofit. So I see all of you government and nonprofit communicators out there. You will see from my slide branding that my partner and I launched Ecology, which is a community for internal communicators. We would love to see all of your lovely faces there and hear your voices with us there. So we launched that earlier this year in February, and it's been a real joy to see it take off and to see the community thrive. The other 3 most important things you need to know about me. Number 1, I am a shameless Britney Spears fan. Very important. Number 2, I am an avid over-the-top shoe collector. And number 3, I have never met a hot dog that I did not like, which is very important now that I'm living in the United States, as many of you will recognize. I will also point out for my friends in the UK that those shoes in the middle there, I use this picture in many of my presentations, regardless of geography, but those shoes are from a designer named Sophia Webster, and she is based in the UK. And one of my little shopping dreams is to go visit her store in London one day, so you can all see how ridiculous those shoes are. I am, of course, on all social media platforms. You can find me on Twitter. Those my Twitter handles up there, as well as the Ecology handle. Happy to connect with anyone on LinkedIn as well. Put a little note that we were from commsHERO, and then my brain will trigger where we know each other from. And of course, Instagram, all those fun places. So thank you everyone for being here. Now let's get into the more important things. This is my favorite quote from my favorite astrologer. Yes, I study and practice astrology. However, regardless of your views on astrology, the quote rings true. The quote says, acknowledge the quality of your work based on the depth of exchange it creates. And as communicators, I believe this is how we measure what we do. Are we creating connection? Is there depth in the exchange? If we're not creating connection, what is the point of our communication? This is how we should judge our work. I don't think we solely judge our work based on clicks or likes or follows or email opens or whatever those metrics are. Those metrics are very important. They are not the entire picture. The true picture and the true value of what we are doing is this depth of exchange and this connection that we have the opportunity to create between ourselves and our stakeholders, our employees and coworkers, and all of the people that we are involved with. That's a theme I've heard throughout today, is the importance of people. And I know we all agree with that. At the very foundation of all of that, of course, is trust. That's the foundation for the work that we're doing. Without trust, we have no connection, because without trust, we can't be open to having those conversations that create that depth of exchange. So I will leave you with that favorite quote. It's in my email signature as well. That's how important it is to me. If you thought your organization struggled to connect employees before 2020, the last year and a half has done you no favors at all. And I know many of you have lived this and are currently living this. Very interesting. There's a new course at New York University at NYU called The Science of Human Connection. And the professor, Niobe Way, who is teaching this course, has this great quote about this course, and that this course is revealing the ways that stories about who we are and what we need most to thrive, as well as ideologies that promote things like misogyny and racism and homophobia, Islamophobia, are disconnecting us from ourselves and disconnecting us from each other, thus leading to a crisis of connection. So her argument is that we are all experiencing this crisis of connection. We've all heard it a million times. In many ways, we have never been more connected, and in many ways, we've never been more disconnected. So this course explores the ways that we're disconnecting from ourselves and from each other. the argument, of course, that we are in this crisis. And I assume she's not making this argument just so you take her course. I do believe there is fact in this. All this to say, we are facing an uphill battle. Whether you are internal or external, whatever specialty of communication you study and work through every day, we are all facing this uphill battle. So the beauty of that is we are in this together and we are all going to learn about this together. But of course, the challenge of this is that we've got a long way to go. We all know as well that what's internal is external. Yes, those are two separate specialties, but there's no wall between them anymore. We as communicators, we understand brand trust. We understand what it means to trust a brand, whether it's an airline or a shoemaker or whoever that is. We understand what that means, but we often don't look inside our organizations to question whether or not there's trust inside what we do. We're worried about whether our customers trust us or whether the stakeholders trust us. We don't often ask whether employees trust what we're doing. If our employees don't trust us, customers won't either. Similarly, if our employees don't feel safe at work, physically and psychologically, our customers won't either. There are two examples on the screen here that I have screenshots of these articles. We all could name probably many other companies who have experienced this over the last couple of years, and especially over the last year. These brands that were at one point trusted, maybe put on a pedestal in some ways, are seeing, I'll call them falls from grace. There's a luggage company called Away. I own one of their suitcases. I was a big fan when they first came out. They're really trendy suitcases, but they have a lifetime warranty. They've redesigned them. They're really cool. They're very durable, all the great things. And their culture was very different. It was a very unique take on this industry. Well, at the end of 2019, employees took to the internet and shared some of their experiences about what it was like to work for this luggage company and how toxic it was. And they shared information that their CEO had put out about working these obscene hours and checking in at 2 a.m. and unrealistic expectations and demeaning communication, just all of these horrible things. And what happened? People turned against them. Customers don't want to deal with companies who treat their employees poorly. The world is more complicated than that, of course. Amazon is an example of that. It's this love to hate relationship where sometimes you don't want to support a company, but maybe you have to. But Amazon has come under fire recently as well with how they treat their warehouse staff and what their expectations are of their drivers. So there's all of this discourse out in the media that employees and sometimes former employees are sharing what it's like to work at places. And if nothing else, I think it's really cool that we are finally seeing the insides of these companies so we can make choices about who we support based on that. I've said many times since getting into the industry of internal comms, if our employees don't like walking through our doors, our customers won't either. Literal doors, maybe figurative, whatever that is. If employees don't enjoy it, your customers won't either. So there's no secret or surprise here that trust, of course, is the foundation of what we do in communications and when we do it successfully. So before we look at how we build trust, I want to look at the research to learn a little bit more about it. And do we understand what trust is? I know as communicators, we often find ourselves rolling our eyes when someone comes to our desk and says, well, we need to send an email. We need to put this on the homepage. Let's make a poster about this. And we always say, well, take a step back. What are we trying to communicate? Who are we trying to reach? So rather than roll our eyes, let's take our own advice. So rather than jumping into, we need to build trust, let's explore what it means to trust in the first place. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Edelman. They put out a trust barometer every year. It's a fascinating piece of research. They look at the trust of institutions and they separate those into 4 categories: business, media, government, and NGOs or nonprofits. So the last time they put out this research was one of the more fascinating times. I will fully admit that often from year to year, I don't see a huge shift in what's happened, except last year. And that's what's so fascinating. So the big win for communications, there's some big wins in it in general. Number one, what's interesting to me, for the first time, private business was ranked as more trustworthy than government. Very interesting given the events of the last year and a half. They also ranked all of these 4 institutions, business, media, government, and NGOs, based on competency and based on ethics. And I'm going to show you a chart for this in a minute. Business now is the only institution that was rated positively for competency and ethics. So the other 3 were not rated positively in that way. The other 2 fascinating pieces of data that they came out with. Number 1, trust in employers is rising and trust in CEOs is falling. And those 2 things would seem to be at odds with each other. But what I see this as in combination means that communicators and our role has way more responsibility than we've ever had before. And I know we all say with great power comes great responsibility. And this is, I'm going to go to this chart here so we can see this first. Here we go. So you can see the top to bottom is ranked from a scale of ethical to unethical with a numerical value. And then from right to left is competent to less competent. So you can see where these institutions rank. Business is the only institution that is in that upper right-hand quadrant ranked positively. Now, it's not ranked wildly positively in terms of ethics, but it's the only one there. That shocked me. Nonprofits, maybe not surprising, are ranked as the most ethical of the 4, but a little bit on the less competent side. Media and government both are ranked in that bottom left-hand quadrant, meaning people do not feel they are operating as ethically as they could. And that government, look at how far that is over on the competency side. Now, I do want to clarify for anyone in communications working in a nonprofit, media, government, this is not anyone saying that you are not doing your job well. This is people not trusting these institutions as a whole. I know we are all doing the best we possibly can right now, so I don't want that to come across as a negative slant on anyone working in communications, but I do think this is very important data to hold on to. So if I go back here, the combination of these things, I think, says that so that communicators have this role where the work of your organization is wildly important to what's happening outside the organization as well. And that your CEO may not be the most trusted source of information within your organization. It may be someone else. The other interesting piece of information is that employer-sourced information was more trusted than any other source. That means that your employees are coming to you to gather data, to learn. And I'm sure many of you have seen that, whether it's on Slack or your intranet or whatever that is, they're coming to the employers and asking questions about wearing masks and vaccinations and the spread of the virus because their work is so heavily impacted by what's going on. They're coming to us. And so we need to take that responsibility not lightly. So another interesting piece of research was done by Harvard Business Review, and this was published in their February 2021 issue, so fairly recently. The article is called "Work from Home is Corroding Our Trust in Each Other." And they did this extensive study about how trust has evolved in this new era of working from home. Trust at work specifically has evolved in this new era that we are in now. And what they found was there's 2 distinct kinds of trust that we need. So number 1 is competence trust, and number 2 was interpersonal trust. And they defined competence trust in that we have to believe that the work in our organization is going to get done and that it will be done properly. That's pretty straightforward. And number 2, we needed to believe that others have integrity, the people we work with have integrity and good intentions. I will summarize that by saying that we all have a need to believe that we have coworkers who are doing their jobs, and that those coworkers are decent human beings. That's my take on the simplicity of those 2 things. So in order to get those, what do we need to do? And this was also part of the study. So they talked about how we develop those 2 kinds of trust. And the first piece is that we need to see it. We need to see the work completed. This is a very different game when we are all working remotely, or when some people are in the office and some people are remotely. There are many organizations who have been handling this for a long time. There are lots of companies that had this hybrid workforce, but it's exploded recently. And so my question to you is, how are you allowing people to show the progress of their work when they're working remotely, when they are not physically at the office? So do you have project management software? Do you use an Excel spreadsheet? Something visual that's not a time tracker. We're going to talk about that in a minute too, but a progress tracker. What are your checks and balances so that people feel confident that the work is getting done without having to have awkward conversations? Number two, we need to understand motivations. This really is summarized by saying we need to get to know our coworkers. There was a session earlier today talking about that, about getting to know the people on your team. What drives them? Why are they here? And I would strongly encourage all of us to lead by example, to share your own motivations with your team, whether that's your boss, someone above you, or your team members, equals, or people reporting to you. We have to lead by example because trust is a choice. We can build trust, but we choose whether or not we trust someone. Sometimes we make that choice because of past behavior. We've been burned in the past, and so we are choosing to not trust that person anymore, but it is still ultimately a choice. So we need someone to go first. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later as well. The third thing we need in order to develop those two kinds of trust, according to this study, is that we need to know that when someone says they'll do something, they'll do it. We need to experience reliability. Again, I would challenge you to lead that. Are you doing what you say you're going to do? How are you tracking that for yourself? Not so that anyone else sees it, but how are you holding yourself accountable so that others can experience that reliability? The other interesting piece of data from this research, and I hope there is no one here who has monitoring software at work, but I suspect there may be. Monitoring is not the answer. What this research showed was that monitoring software, so that if you're not familiar with it, it's any kind of software that has, it can track your mouse movement, can track your screen time, essentially to know how busy you are throughout the day. Not surprisingly, this research showed that monitoring software leads to increased stress, increased anxiety, and burnout. Not only is monitoring not productive, it's counterproductive. We knew this, right? We knew this, but now we have research to back it up. I want to share a story with you about trust, and this is my favorite trust story, partly because it involves dogs, and I understand this commsHERO pets thing is a thing, so I'm super happy to share a story about a dog. This is not my dog, but I guess kind of is my dog. This is Duke, and Duke is a boxer who was my neighbor's dog when I was still living in Canada. I moved into a new neighborhood, and I would often see this gentleman walking his dog every night. And so, of course, I would say hi. And of course, I'm being the dog lover I am, I would often come up and, scratch the dog's ears and say hi. And this just became a routine. And so often every night I'd meet up with this gentleman and his dog. I had no idea where they lived in my complex, but I assumed they lived somewhere there, and chat with the dog. Of course, if you're a dog person, this is probably the best part of your day. So one night I am out there, I'm taking my garbage out, and this gentleman is walking Duke. And so I stop and chat, scratching the dog, we're playing. And I say to the dog, I say to Duke, because I hope I'm not the only person who talks to dogs here. So I say to Duke, when are you coming over to my place for a sleepover? And we laughed. And then his owner says to me, are you serious? And I said, well, sure, why not? And he says, well, because my daughter and her husband and their kids are coming to visit. And they're going to be visiting from Toronto. They're staying with us. And the kids aren't used to a dog. Duke's not used to kids. We're trying to figure out where we can have him live just for the 4 days that they're going to be with us. And he's not used to a kennel. So we're hoping to find someone who can take care of the dog. So I'm like, sure, why not? So I said, well, when are they coming over? Tomorrow. Great. No problem. I'll just completely change everything in my life around this dog, because that's what we do. Again, if you're a dog lover. So we exchange numbers. We finally exchange names. I find out this gentleman's name is Bob. So we exchange numbers. He says, I'll bring the dog over tomorrow, explain the time, whatnot. Fine. Great. I'm super excited to have this dog with me. So later that evening, I'm calling my mom and I'm telling her about, I'm going to be dog sitting and I'm so excited. And Bob's going to bring the dog over tomorrow afternoon. And she says, well, who is Bob? Well, Bob's my neighbor. Well, what's Bob's last name? I'm like, I don't know. She goes, well, where does he live? I don't know. I mean, I know he lives in my neighborhood, but I don't actually know where he lives. And she's asking me these questions, none of which I have answers for. But what was so fascinating about that exchange was that I assumed that if Bob trusted me to take his dog for 4 days, then I could probably trust him. What I didn't know at the time is that that act is proven by science. What science tells us is that if someone demonstrates trust towards you, you will have an easier time choosing to trust them. And so that's where when I talk about leading the way and communicators being the ones to say, okay, I'm going to be the one to trust first. That's a great example of it. There's science behind that. When you show trust to others, they are more likely to show trust to you. We also know this in our own lives. When someone trusts us, we are more likely to trust them. Duke and I ended up becoming best friends, of course. How could you not with a face like that? And I would often dog sit him. So he kind of became my surrogate dog for a considerable period of time while I was still living in Winnipeg. But I always share that story because I think it's such a great example of trust in a very organic way without knowing any of the science behind it at the time. So the most important part of this is, how are we implementing what we know? We have all this research about trust. How are we taking this information and strengthening our organizations? One of the questions that I often hear asked in our industry is about who owns the employee experience. And people have a wide variety of answers for that. Some people will say HR owns the employee experience. Some people will say HR does, but they shouldn't. The C-suite owns the employee experience. Everything happens from the top down. No. Marketing should own the employee experience. No, communications should own the employee experience. I think that's one of the arguments I hear most often, is that we should be owning this. My response to that often is, if I asked you, who owns my marriage? I am married. Do I own my marriage, or does my partner own my marriage? Well, of course, neither one of us owns the marriage. It's a partnership. And I challenge you to see employee engagement and the employee experience in the same way. How about no one owns the employee experience because everyone owns the employee experience? What about if each person accepted responsibility for the employee experience? I think that would make it a more holistic view of engagement, and we'd see better results for that. First and foremost, on that implementation piece, we all need to own our energy. What this means, being responsible for the energy that you bring into a space, is about being allowed to have a bad day, but owning it. And so this is an actual poster. This is a photo of a poster that I used to have hanging in my former office. It was probably 4 or 5 feet long, so a couple of meters long, and probably a meter high. And it hung on our wall because it was a reminder to all of us that we modeled our energy and our responsibility for our coworkers. It sounds really small, and in many ways it is, but this is where we have to start. If communicators are not demonstrating what we want from others, we'll never see that change. If you give language to how you are feeling, you will feel better. There's also science behind that. So our team would often say, if you came in and you had a bad day because you woke up late and your kids spilled their cereal and you needed gas in your car, all of those things, and you came into work and you are a mess. And I also will say this applies online too. We all know when we jump on a Zoom call with someone, we can tell, even though we're not in the same room, you can often tell someone's distracted, they're angry, they're upset, they're frustrated, whatever that is. Owning that for yourself will make you feel better and will also create an environment of comfort and trust on your team. If you can own it and say, listen, I had a morning and here's what happened and I am a little bit off today. That allows the other person to acknowledge, oh, you know what? We've all been there. No problem. Do you need 5 minutes to just decompress before we have this conversation? Great. It allows everyone to own their own energy. So how are we leading this change? If we are owning our energy and all of these lovely existential things I like to talk about, what are the tangible steps that we are taking to lead the change? And this research shows the best way is very small, repeated steps. Consistency is very key. I have on this slide, trust is one size fits none. It's going to be unique for every relationship and every individual. But it starts with how you are demonstrating trust. We can't control other people, so we need to lead by example. So repeated small steps is this first way. If there's someone in your organization that you have had a bad history with, or they have done something to make you question trusting them, that's okay. You can still choose to be cautious, but try some repeated small steps to show them trust. And it's possible that they may start taking those same small steps back and mirroring what you are demonstrating. Vulnerability is such a hot topic this day, and there's a big reason for it. One of the great ways that I've seen this demonstrated by people, again, if you're in an office where people don't trust each other, nobody's going to be vulnerable, right? We don't trust people. I'm not going to share personal information with you or share that I'm overwhelmed or scared or don't know how to do this particular skill with someone I don't trust. So one of the great ways I saw this built up in an organization was they started doing very short lunch and learn sessions where coworkers shared something that was a skill or something they knew about that was not work related. So, for example, someone talked about decorating cookies and how you do that and how you get better at it. Things that were not work related at all. And what that created was an opportunity for people to get to know other coworkers on a personal level, and it allowed for more vulnerability. We don't need to be sharing childhood trauma with our coworkers, but we do need some level of trust and personal relationship. Number 3, I know we all know this as communicators, but this is the other piece of the research. How are we doing this change? We are communicating what isn't changing. When things are staying the same, it's very important for us to communicate that as well, because there is a comfort level in what we know. And so if we can share with people, these are the things that are staying the same, you're going to create a little level of comfort there. And if you can give a timeline for that, even better. The last thing, of course, and I think this is probably obvious at this point, is finding time for individual one-on-one conversations. Again, trust is one size fits none. So if you start a relationship with at least some level of trust, that one-on-one time is going to be much easier, and it's going to help you build that trust over time because you're going to get to know them. Find some ways to have structured conversations. You don't need to go for lunch with them necessarily, but find some ways to get to know people one-on-one so that you can really get to know that personal part of them. I will leave you with my other favorite quote. If we're going to be honest, we also need to do this with compassion. Writer Bruce Kasanoff used to write for Forbes magazine, "Honesty without compassion is cruelty." And so we all need to keep this in mind, that we can be honest with people in a way that is compassionate. Clear is kind is one of my favorite communication tools as well. The last place that I worked in a corporate job was for a nursing regulation organization. I know it varies from country to country, but I think we all have some version of that. And we often had to give bad news if someone didn't pass the nursing exam, for example. We had to tell them that they were not going to be a registered nurse. We can do that in a way that's honest and compassionate. And they may not like the answer, but we can do that with compassion. So I will implore all of you to use this quote as well. So I'm happy to take questions, happy to have conversations. I will leave this slide, and I'm going to actually stop sharing my screen so that we can chat if we need to.
Thank you for that. That was brilliant and great quote to end on as well, because I'm sure we have all been in at least one of those situations. So just to touch on some of the points that you made that I know I resonate with as well about, I suppose our employees are our brand ambassadors. So, and I've never thought about it like that when you said we don't ever ask our employees, whether or not they trust us, but we are always focused on the stakeholders and the public.
Absolutely.
Where it needs to be within as well. So I like that, and it does just shift your mindset. There was a company that we couldn't remember the name of it, but there was one over here where we, I'm not sure if it was in lockdown, where they did say they were going to monitor their staff, and I think the staff put it out in the public domain, and there was uproar. We were trying to work out who that was. Because they did have backlash. Not a great thing to do. Nobody wants to feel like that unless you're on Big Brother.
Right. And you're starting off from a place of mistrust, right? You're starting off right off the bat with saying, we don't trust you, so we need to monitor you. Well, if someone said that to me, I'd be very offended, right? And so then I'm not in a great place to be open and do my job well if I automatically think my employer doesn't trust me. So
Absolutely, yeah. We have had some comments in. I'm just going to have a look because I did see some that I thought we'll bring up to the stage. The monitoring one. So Tracy says monitoring is not productive, and I'm far more productive at meeting. Oh yeah, that's true. I think like what we said there, you don't feel trusted, and you're basically told as you come in, we don't trust you.
right.
You're not going to get off on the right foot there.
Right. And I think Tracy, your first point too is so powerful. Monitoring is not productivity, right? Monitoring someone's actions from day to day. I have to admit, I was shocked that software even exists that will track your mouse activity and what like I don't understand who have you hired that you need to track their mouse activity? Like we're adults here, and it's shocking to me. So I agree. The best productivity is when you are results focused with the support and resources along the way, not tracking the minute by minute activity of your day.
Yeah, and I think some companies haven't learned really through the pandemic because people have been working remotely, and I know lots of conversations that have been had where telling your staff that you need to come back into the office.
Yep.
So what have they been doing through this pandemic? Surely the business has been ticking over.
Yep.
That's your level of trust.
Yes.
So why are you demanding that they all go back in? What about flexible working and things like that? So there's a lot to discuss there. And like you said, changing the mindset. I also really liked the having those one-on-one conversations.
Yes.
Because I felt like I usually talk in groups, and I did feel like through the pandemic with Zooms and Teams and things like that, I was having more one-on-one conversations, maybe not in person, like,
yep.
But I was having them. And it did make me think that I need to do more of this.
Yeah.
Because I tend to attend board meetings or a comms meeting. So yeah, one-on-one.
And I think the benefit of having something structured and set up regularly, whether it's with your boss or a coworker, whoever that is, even if it's a 15-minute check-in, if that session is scheduled regularly, then you both know that you have a set time to come forward and have conversations about things. There's no awkward, I have to bring something up that's a bit uncomfortable. That means I have to schedule a meeting for it. What am I going to say it's about? You have that time to have those conversations regularly. And it also prevents the, scheduling calendar overlap mess that we're all always in, that you have that time set aside anyway. If you need to cancel, you can cancel, but at least it's reserved there and you don't have to worry about trying to find time.
Absolutely, yeah. I suppose the other thing as well is listening to your employees. So, we all ask for employees to complete surveys.
Mm-hmm.
Where do those surveys go? Are we listening to them? Are we responding to them and reacting to them?
Yeah. That's a great.
Lee, bring that up.
I love it.
Let them know they will be supported. Oh yeah. So Harry, former firearms officer and traffic sergeant, he was supported in his role. And I know something that he has said is that actually, do you know what? Can we bring Harry up to the stage? Because he'll explain it better. He does explain it really well about how he was supported, which is unusual in policing, I'm hearing.
Absolutely. Yep.
Just waiting for him to accept. Harry, do you want to explain your comment there?
Yes. Hi. Yeah, just as well, because I've just unplugged everything. I'm sitting in my mum's armchair with the big floral wallpaper behind, and people would have a wonderful impression of what this hardened firearms officer's house looks like.
I like the juxtaposition. I'd like to see that, actually.
Yeah. So basically, I found just running a small section, and that section interwoven with other sections across the force. You're relying on each other all the time, and the armed response guys and girls, and you need to. I found it was best you trusted them until they proved you couldn't trust them. And then you have to, it's quite an abrupt sentence, but if you thought, no, I need to keep a closer eye on that one because the paperwork isn't quite up to scratch. Okay, if you've got brand new officers just off the street, just starting, then I don't mean you don't trust them, but you basically monitor them a lot more closely on that. And I found that really worked. The armed response guys and girls, they were quite experienced in the role they did. And I found there was a supervisor that came in who had come in from a response area where she was dealing with a lot of officers with no experience. She started treating them the same, and they really kicked back at that. And it was just a very simple thing that I pointed out. People just don't like to be micromanaged, do they really?
No, they don't. And Harry, you bring up a great point too about not micromanaging. And I think everyone is quick to say that they do not want to be micromanaged. I think we can all agree on that. I would love to challenge all of us to look at how we interact with our coworkers and our bosses and our employees to really explore and make sure that we are not micromanaging, right? Nobody wants to be micromanaged, but I think it's easy to see it when it's someone else doing it to you and harder to see it when you might be doing it. It's uncomfortable often because that means we have to step back and really be reflective of our own behavior and actions. But I think it's a really important thing to do. And also to your point about, if someone's brand new and you're maybe monitoring a little bit more, I think part of what maybe, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but part of what you mean is being more supportive to that new person.
Exactly.
Right. So so that they know that there is someone there that has been around longer and maybe has the right tools and resources for them if they do make mistakes.
And I think Sophia was probably referring maybe more, I do apologize, Sophia, if it was that, is let them know they'll be supported if they make mistakes. I always liked it when one of my officers, a newer officer, so to speak, to the section, if they messed up, that was my opportunity then. That I knew it wasn't malicious, it wasn't dishonest, it wasn't negligent. It just happened because you were human. And if it meant that you backed them up against all the other bosses and you supported them, you had them for life. And they were devoted to you because they didn't want to swap you for someone who wasn't like that. And there's too much of that in this world, I think.
Agreed.
Thank you. Do you think we just forget how to support people as we get older? Because, when you're younger, I felt supported by everyone. Everyone wants to help you. And, you're allowed to make mistakes. But I feel like as you get older, if you make a mistake, a bad manager would have a go at you. It's like the end of the world, isn't it? But when you're a child and you make a mistake, it's like, oh, it's okay, and you're given the reasons why.
Is that to Kristin or me?
Both of you.
We can fight over it.
It's to have. I knew in social media side of things, in my police force, I knew again I had top cover because they had the good of the force in mind. They wanted to progress the force. They wanted to use this modern method to proceed. They didn't want to go back into the 20th century. And they were realistic enough that they knew there were going to be some trip ups. I was going to stand on the odd landmine or trip over the odd tripwire, I say. But they knew it was with all good intention. And that is so important. Otherwise, the first thing, I wouldn't be here now. I would have dropped it like a hot potato. There's no way. But I knew that they were reasonable people and they would support me unless I did something that was completely outrageous over a bottle of red wine and said something that I shouldn't have. And then quite rightly so.
I do think as we age, our expectations change, and maybe unfairly so. We forget. It's easy to forget what it was like to be in that new position where you're more prone to making mistakes. I agree, Sophie. I think that's an interesting point to keep in mind.
Brilliant. Thank you. I think I've just been given orders from Lee to wrap up. So thank you so much for that. Lots to think about, lots of food for thought there. I'm sure everyone will be thinking about all the points that you made there. I know I am already. So thank you so much. I've just got a couple of housekeeping things to wrap up with. So if Actually, can we show some emoji love? Because I know I've missed that. And I'm going to do some of them because I loved that session. Thank you. So we are running a few competitions for those who have joined us for this session and not for the rest of the day. We are running competitions. We're asking people to share the content. So even if you take a picture of this screenshot and share it, use the hashtag commsHERO, and we will be picking winners at the end of each day. So we're doing that soon. We've got Lee and Kate in the office here going to pick the winners, and we announce them the following morning, and you win things like diaries, Sharpies. I'm not going to move it all because there's a big pile and it'll collapse on me, but there's vouchers, pets at home. So, we're treating the pets as well as the humans, Amazon vouchers, and lots more things to win. So hashtag commsHERO. We do have an after party as well on Thursday from 8 o'clock. It's free. So everyone on this platform, if you want to share it with your friends, family, bring them along. Let's have a big party. We've got a comedian, Arthur Smith, and DJ Graham Park, who was on earlier. And I do need to say thank you to our sponsors. So we've got Staffbase, Prezi, React and Share, Red Kite Community Housing, and First Up, and they are across the top of the screen if anyone wants to refer back to them. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Kristin, because I know I was told that I mentioned your name wrong earlier, so I apologise for that. But yeah, and thank you, everyone, for your comments. And we'll be back again tomorrow.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.